Hello and welcome to the Curator's Salon podcast. I'm Geeta Joshi, and today I am joined by my dear friend Michael Wallner. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Another podcast that is long overdue. We chat, regularly when I see you at the fairs, on socials, but this podcast, I'm delighted to actually finally get a time with you to chat about things. I would love for you to share your background. You had a career in TV and production and all those sorts of things before you transitioned into being an artist full time. Can you share more about that journey and that decision?
Yes, I worked in television in light entertainment for about 15 years, and which I loved. I had a great time, but towards the end of it, you have a bit of a shelf life, I think, in TV too. And I did a lot of live television, which is very stressful, but not very important stress, if you know what I mean. Like it's if it goes wrong, it goes wrong, and then you're onto something else. So, but I did some photography on the side when I was working in television, and I always loved taking pictures. And then towards the end of my TV career, I was really thinking, how can I do it properly, do art properly, or do I want to do it properly? Um, and then one day I put some artwork on the walls of a restaurant in Wandsworth where I live, in Conigan's restaurant, and to see some canvases, and that was the first time, 2011, 2012, something like that, that I had my work up on the wall. And when I was working in there, I used to take my computer and sit and do work. I found a leaflet to an open studio show in Earlsfield, and I thought, oh, that's near me. I'll go and have a look. And those studios were Wimbledon Art Studios, and so I went along to have a look, and I was blown away. I was absolutely blown away. There was about 200 artists there, proper artists. I expected it to be hobby artists, but it wasn't. There were professional artists there, and I thought, if I'm going to change my career, I should be somewhere like that where I could, absorb their knowledge and that community. And so after a month after I went to that fair, Open Studios, I moved in. And it was a bit of a surprise to me, but there I was in 2012, and I gave up. It basically gave up my TV career then. I did freelance work for the first 2 years of my time in the studios because I knew nobody at all in the art world. I didn't have any contacts at all, so I really didn't know what I was doing at all. And so, in order to fund my studio and the time, I had some savings from my TV days, but also I did freelance work from 1 or 2 days a week just to pay for my studio and get settled in. But moving into Wimbledon Art Studios really did change my life. I was printing on canvas in those days, which I don't do at all anymore. And um, you see artists working with different materials, and you chat about ideas, and it's a fantastic community, and you can share experiences of working at fairs, the do's and don'ts. And so that's been an absolutely fantastic experience. And I think if I hadn't found that leaflet in that restaurant, who knows what would have happened.
Amazing, like the power of a leaflet, right?
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah, and I
that's
suppose if you have your mind open to things, I get around a bit and I go and see shows and I visit people and exhibitions. These opportunities do crop up if you put yourself out there, I think.
Yeah, I think when you start looking, you can see, and I mean, I don't know how things were, 12 years ago in terms of the online space, in terms of finding opportunities and exhibiting spaces and things, but like putting yourself in a community of artists like at Wimbledon Studios is amazing. And they've got some great artists out there. I still haven't been out there. Every time you guys have a open studio, I'm either away or there's something else going on that I can't make it over there. Actually, on the subject of your of Wimbledon Art Studios, like you say, there's a lot of artists there. Um, the other thing I like about that studio and the way you work there together is that you have like a regular open studios. Is it 2 or 3 times a year?
Yeah, it's twice a year. We do one in May and one in November. And it's so we open our studios for 4 days so people from the outside world can come in to see us in our natural habitats in our studios. And when I went round as a visitor, I was so amazed because you don't often get the chance to see an artist in their natural habitat for one. So sometimes the artists are working on work right there, but they might have, you get to see them in the natural and talk to the artists. When you go to a lot of shows and it's galleries, which are great, but I like to find out the story behind the art from the artists and what makes them paint like that or draw like that. So I found that a really good experience. So now I'm there on the other side, I love doing those shows. So I think for 4 days the studios are open and visitors can come around. I think there's 250, about 200 do the show, and there's I don't know 4 or 5 thousand visitors. So it's it's an amazing experience, and people are always amazed. They didn't sometimes they don't know it's there, and they're pleased to discover it. It's really good fun. I think talking to visitors is one of my favorite things about being an artist. It can be very isolating as an artist. You're in your studio all day long making your work. Sometimes you might not speak to anybody, which I think on a long term, on long term is not a good idea. So when you meet, people from the outside world at all these shows, I think I love that.
Yeah, no, I love that it's such a coordinated effort and such a large number of the artists actually take part, because my visits to Wimbledon have always been by invitation. So I'm literally going to see one or two people. And I will make it out to the actual open studios one of these days. Michael, I wanted you just to share with the listeners your work. It has an architectural angle. Has that always been your interest? And then also, you mentioned that you print on canvas, or you used to print on canvas, and I know now there's a lot more printing on metal and things like that. Just listeners that are not familiar with your work, can you describe it a bit more?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me, am I an architect or was I an architect? Because a lot of my pieces are based on skyline views or landmark buildings or landmark landscapes. And no, I'm not. I wasn't ever an architect, but I love architecture. Particularly if it's a building which has got something unique or different about it. Say like St Paul's Cathedral in London or the Chrysler Building in New York, those kind of things. So I've always worked on architectural styles, and then I always take the pictures. My work is based on pictures that I take, and I color them digitally on the computer, the graphics tablet, and then when all the coloring is done, we print them usually onto the surface of brushed aluminium, which picks out the details if you've got a historical building, and it makes the colors super vibrant. The silver and the metal makes them super vibrant. But I work with other materials. I'm always looking for different materials to work from. I've done some neon, print on reclaimed wood sometimes. I've got one which is the River Thames, but it's actually got moving water in it. A motor inside the water. Oh, it's silicone liquid, and it flows like the river, and then every 10 minutes a shopping trolley and a whale float by. So I'm always looking for different new materials and also new ways of getting views. If I can find an angle which is an unusual angle of a building, especially from above. I'm always looking for something a bit more unusual. So when I printed on canvas at first, I then realized that I want to try and do things a little differently. How can I present work about London buildings? Lots of people do London buildings, but how can I present it so it's different? And then when I found the other materials, when I moved into the studios in 2012, I didn't know you could do that. And then as soon as I found out you could do that, that things just took off.
I love it. But also, I feel like you have a really interesting signature style, like with the very flat colors, sometimes quite vibrant, these pinks and blues.
Mm.
And then the architectural detail is usually in black and white or etched into the metal plate as well, which I think really stands out as like very recognizable Michael Wallner art.
Mm. Well, somebody gave me some advice when I first started, like 2010 that was, I think, and I had a website with my photographs on it. And he was a complete stranger. I didn't know this person, and he said to me, I really like your photographs, but what is it that you do? Like, what's your thing? And he said you've got different styles of photography, and if I say, oh, Michael Warner, he does, I recognize his style anywhere. At the moment, I can't do that because you've got different styles. And that was the first time somebody had, said something. I wish I could remember who that was because I owe him quite a lot. And then I thought, oh yes, that's right. You've got to have your sort of unique style, and then people will recognize it. And then that's when I started honing it down into a particular style with the, I guess the sort of pop art colors, the bright pinks and the bright blues and yellows and things. Plus, I view the city as a generally positive experience. I know lots of people don't like cities, but I do. I find it very stimulating and exciting, and I find the bright colors sort of an expression of that.
Yeah, I love that. This is really interesting talking about like, yeah, finding your style because that takes time as well. I've written about this on socials, right, where people kind of resisting having that signature style, but it's not something you need to fight against, right? It should be more congruent and all that kind of thing, right? It's more authentic when you find it. And it doesn't mean that you can't be experimenting in other ways, like you're doing yourself there with the materials that then that is presented on. I
Mm.
wanted to also ask you about your fair experience. When did you first do an art fair?
I think 2013, I did the New Artist Fair. I think that was my first one. And I didn't sell anything. So, but I learnt a little bit about what it takes to exhibit a show because, when you do it for the first time and you don't really know anybody in the art world, you don't really know what you're doing. You just sort of make it up as you go along, and it was a good experience, even though I didn't sell anything, and it taught me, next time. And then I think then when I started doing the aluminium pieces, then I applied to the other art fair which in the Truman Brewery, and I think my first one I did that was 2014.
Amazing. You're a regular at TOEF these days. And I
Mm,
know you've shown across the US. You're a regular at the London edition, and you recently did an Australian fair as well.
mm,
Um, that is one of the things I really appreciate about you and the way you show up for your audience. And, we know where we're going to see Michael, right? He's usually going to be at one of these London fairs. That's, because I've not been to the other art fair in the US. And I think that is something that people appreciate about like that regular appearance there. I think people give up on fairs a bit too soon sometimes.
mm.
Um, that also obviously creates a nice rhythm to your year because you have to book these your spot, your booth, all that kind of thing, months in advance. Can you
Mm.
take us through some of that? Like, how did that all sort of come about? Did you find that TOEFL was the right place for you, or did you
Well,
have in that routine and rhythm with it?
I guess I need to keep myself busy. So that's partly it. And I think when I was in television, I worked in live television, and you have deadlines in live TV that you work towards. And I've always been I like those deadlines. And it was a university, I would be better if I had a deadline. And so I find that from a practical point of view, the shows provide a useful deadline, and you have to learn how to plan your year properly. Because for me, if I'm doing a show in March, so for instance, yesterday I just found out I got into the other art fair in London for the first week in March. So it sounds like it's a long time between now. It's what, 3 months or something, or is it a few months away? But actually, I have to make the work. Then I order a sample, to see whether it looks okay. So that takes 2 weeks to arrive. Then if it's good and I need to order it a big size, that's another 2 weeks. So that's a month, and then I have to ship it to the venue, which is 2 weeks. So that's 6 weeks before the fair, after I've actually made the piece, designed the piece on the computer, it's gone out and taken the photographs. So I'd say 3 months planning for a show is minimum. So you've got to really think backwards. That's the date. When do you have to have everything made by? I have had times when my work has been delivered the day after the show started, and that's very rare. But you've got to build in that buffer time, so if something goes wrong, you can fix it. But I do quite a lot of shows. I probably do 10 or 11 shows a year, which for some people is too much, but I like that rhythm. It makes me make work on a regular basis. It makes me when I do the shows abroad, one, I want some adventure to keep myself stimulated and not do the same thing all the time. So if I go to do shows in America, that's a, you know, in New York or Chicago or LA, I've done, you know, that's an adventure. I've got to work out what things they like, what's that market like, what buildings do I need to do. You know, some buildings in New York, for instance, I really like, but they don't hold them in great affection, so you probably won't sell that. All these things to work out, but I love when you've done a few shows, you do get into a rhythm. And when I think back to the first shows that I did, I think I said this when I did an interview in the magazine with you, that the first other art fair I did, you know, I wore my smart clothes for the private view when I was hanging my work, which is obviously a schoolboy era. So I was quite sweaty, and then somebody came up to me and said, you're a bit sweaty. So actually, 5 minutes before we opened, I was drying my armpits on the hair dryers in the men's toilets. So now I know not to do that. But you know, every show you do, you work out something, a better way of doing it. And even now, 10 years on, I'm still working out, you know, different ways of doing my labels so they're a bit more expressive, or layout of the shows, or what kind of art works and what doesn't. It's a constant learning process.
Amazing. Yeah, you have contributed to Art Scene magazine. There was an article, was it, I think it was earlier this year.
Mm,
I'll link to it in the show notes for the listener about, your best tips on art fairs and getting started with them and things like that. And also just what you mentioned there, with your work being architectural and referencing the built environment, slightly adapting some of the artwork that you're showing to be more relevant to the environment, to the
mm.
city that you're showing as well. Is that, do you spend time, like, let's say you were in Chicago, do you spend time before or after your art fair days actually, visiting the place?
I do, yes, yes. I mean, I always take the photographs myself, unless I've done a commission for somebody and they've wanted a particular picture. I prefer to take it because I know the angles I want, I know what things I need to stand out. And so I usually go, if I can afford to go beforehand, like with Chicago, I went 6 months beforehand to take pictures of all the buildings, and I made the mistake of going in November, which was a bit of a shock to the system in Chicago. It's very, very cold. But anyway, but I got the shots that I needed, and then I made the work for the next time. But every time I go after the fair, bizarre though this sounds, my way of relaxing is to walk miles and miles and miles afterwards. I find that it helps me unwind and sort of decompress. And every time a city like New York or Chicago, it changes so frequently. You know, there's new buildings, there's new things, new angles you discover. So I like to take updated pictures every time I go there.
I love that. So it's like your trip there is obviously you're doing the fair and then there's a research element to it as well.
Yeah, I mean that's really really important. So I've got some I buy the more interesting guidebooks. You know, there's slightly different guidebooks that recommend, let's say, the more quirky aspects, or how to get the shots, aerial shots. So I've done the helicopter flights a few times over the cities in New York, with the doors off, so you basically, you're hovering over the Empire State Building, so you can get real close-ups from up above. So you're harnessed in, but you're sitting on out of the aircraft, and that means you can see the patterns and shapes of urban environments so well from the air, which you can't really see on the ground. And I love patterns in my work are quite a big feature, whether it's the streets or whether it's the style of a building. And I find if I can get up in the air, it gives me an original angle anyway.
Well, that was a unknown how adventurous you are with actually getting these shots.
Yeah.
Well done. Obviously, doing fairs abroad, away from your home country, there's a lot of cost implications in that. How do you budget for that?
There's a few sort of tricks you pick up over the years to work it out. I mean, I don't have a family and kids and anything like that. That does help. Although a lot of the people who do the fairs with me, they do have kids. So I what do? I usually get my flights with air miles. So I spend everything of my life on my credit card, which I pay off, but it gives me air miles, so I get a cheaper flight. So, for instance, my Miami flight recently was £260 return, so that makes it, decent. And then a whole bunch of us, say in LA, for example, there's seven of us who share an Airbnb, so that makes it quite cheap. And then I put my work in storage over there, which is a third of the price of shipping it back home. So one, I know it's there when I go back, and then I just have to send new pieces. So all of these things that keep the costs down. In New York, my sister lives in New Jersey, so I can stay with her for a bit. And so in the end, those kind of tricks, that the fares there are not that much more expensive than they are here. But that's taken years to work all those things out, and now the friends I'm in the Airbnb with in LA, they're my friends I've been exhibiting with for 10 years. So it's just a great source of comfort being with them if things go not so well or something like that. But we love traveling together. We've done a few sort of road trips while we were there, but it also, on a practical sense, it keeps the cost down because the fares are not cheap to do. But I find life's about a series of collecting adventures, isn't it? And I want to see the world, and if I could do that through my art, then that's a great way of doing it.
So great. Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely the investment that goes into these things, right? It's investing in yourself, it's investing in the adventure of actually being an artist to
Mhm.
some degree. But no, there's some
And I,
great advice there on
I,
budgeting as well.
Yeah, I don't. If I don't have the money, then I don't apply for the fares, and so one feeds the other. You know what I mean? If I don't do well at a particular fair, if I've done well at the one before that, and it evens out, then that's okay. And I think you mentioned earlier in the podcast about showing up more than once at these fairs, and in fact that was advice given to me by a fellow artist when I first did the fairs. They said, you need three times at a fair you really need to be at. So one, you're there, new person. Everyone's like, oh, they're new, and sometimes, especially with the aluminium work, people take a bit of time to get used to it. Um, it's not a painting, so what is it? And then the second time you're there, you're sort of more established, and they go, okay, they're still there. And then the third time you're there, you go, okay, he's definitely an established artist. He's there all the time, and in a way, they trust you a bit more if you're there for the long term. The people, and they believe in you a bit more. So I think it's useful. It is investment. It is an investment, and you will take hits. There'll be some shows you don't do very well, and some shows you do well. Um, and you've got to be able to put up with that, put up with the lows as well as the highs.
And recently you were in Miami. Tell
Mm.
me about that. So last week was Art Basel Miami. I didn't go. I was watching lots of people out there exhibiting, visiting the fairs, all these sorts of things. I just watched it all on social media. You were out there yourself with Sarah Maple, who's also
Mhm.
been in the magazine. And how was that for you? Were you there scouting out fairs
Yeah,
for yourself, or what was going on?
it was a bit of everything actually. It was a bit of scouting. I would very keen on exhibiting there. I've got a few Miami pieces I've done, and I'll do some more. I love the city. I think the Art Deco buildings are second to none. I mean, they really are sensational architecture there, which I love. So I'm keen, and if anybody hasn't been to the Art Week, it is one of the craziest weeks you can possibly see. There's like 100,000 people descending, and it's the size of maybe the Affordable Art Fair in London, but I don't know, maybe 20 of those. And so there's lots of different fairs. One of them is Aqua Art is in a motel, 1930s motel, which I love. So I had a lot of friends who were exhibiting there, and I was going to basically recce and find out some information from them. Can I apply to some of the fairs? Which ones should I apply for? Which ones worked? Which ones didn't? So it was full on. I think I saw 9 shows in 5 days. But it was quite last minute. Like I said, I budgeted for it. I did a commission which I finished just the week before Miami, and so I used that money from the commission to pay for my ticket to go to Miami. So that's how it works. One thing feeds another. And so I've got to make the decision now as to, can I afford to exhibit there next December? Or I'm always looking for different avenues, which I think is a good piece of advice somebody gave me, because you never know when the avenues you have, they might dry up, that, people might go bust, galleries might go bust, new ones might crop up, you might want to be them. So you always have to be on the lookout for adapting your revenue streams. So I was going to talk to people, have meetings with galleries and stuff like that. And it was very full on, but very productive in the end, actually.
Amazing. And I think that, like you said, you're like scouting out the fairs, where would be the right placement for your work? But there's also like who could you show with, whose work would sit appropriately in conversation with yours if you were to share a booth, which galleries are worth approaching. I mean, I think there is so much to learn out of that. Amazing. Well, I've been talking about maybe showing it Miami as well, whether it's next year or the year after. So I'm sure we'll stay in touch and figure stuff.
Yeah. It's a very interesting thing. I mean, for me, it's got the best and worst of the art world. There's some fantastic stuff, but there's also there's a lot of money floating around there, and it's very subjective, the fairs. Whether you like them or not. It's a very mixed bag, but I find it a very exciting place to be, and I think the fact that so many people are going to a city to see art, whether or not it's my taste or not, doesn't matter. It means that they're going to see art and they're excited by it. And I think that's a brilliant thing to be encouraged. There's tons and tons of outdoor installations in Miami, none of which are damaged. They're all there. They're all really appreciated. And I think it's a great inspiration, I think.
Yeah, I think we also go for the sun, to be fair. I mean, that has been one of my motivations.
Yeah, yeah, that doesn't go unnoticed. But I mean, it was yeah, we did have a couple of cloudy days, but generally it's quite nice to see an installation of 100 elephants on the beach when it's sunny. So
It is. Okay, tell me something unexpected that you saw in Miami. Was there an astronaut playing golf? Was there a Mona Lisa made out of buttons? What did you see?
there was quite a lot of I would say left of center artwork, and some of which I really liked, and some of which I didn't. There's definitely a big market for large sort of Mickey Mouses, you know,
Okay.
covered in resin, and half astronaut, half Mickey Mouse, that kind of thing. There's a lot of that, and
And
that's
don't they usually have like a Louis Vuitton logo slapped on the side there as well?
yes, yeah, or they're blowing some bubble gum, and but
Mm.
that's that's fine. That's not my taste, but that's somebody else's taste, and I think as long as it's somebody's taste, then that's good. So there's definitely there's definitely you do see some surprising combinations of subject matter. Let's just say that.
Oh, love it. Michael, before we wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to share? What have you got coming up next year?
Next year I will be doing the other art fair in London in March. I think it's the 6th of March. And after that, I'm not sure yet. I mean, I've applied to a few fairs, so that's what, we're constantly applying. So I would love to, hopefully I would be doing shows in New York and Chicago, and maybe something with Artie Gallery, which is my London collective. We'd like to do something else together again. And then whether I decide to do Miami or not, and that's in December. So there's plenty to think about.
Lots going on. Amazing. I will add the link to your website and your socials in the show notes for the listener to come and over and follow you. Michael, thank you so much for being my guest, and hopefully I will come over to the studio and see you really soon.
Yes, thank you so much, and we very appreciative of people like you, big support to the art world and to emerging artists like me. So we're always grateful for the support.
Oh, that's nice to hear. Thank you.